starting by Eliana Cardoso. Leva o microfone ali. Can you please identify yourself before you make the question?
Eliana Cardoso. Is this on?
Acho que tá ligado.
I'm a columnist at the newspaper Valor Econômico. And I have two questions related to what you called the internal crisis of legitimacy. The first part of the question is related to growth. You mentioned that China needs to keep growing to avoid the dissatisfaction with growing inequality. Now, if there's something we learn from Chinese experience, is that growth doesn't solve distribution problems, that the fast growth period is exactly the period when inequality has increased enormously. And if dissatisfaction is not with poverty, for which growth is a fantastic medicine, but it is inequality, then growth is not a solution to this issue. And the second part of the question that will bring me back to this one is that you mentioned that China is now dealing with the corruption problem because of a restoration of politics on ethical grounds. I wonder with dealing with corruption is not a way of diverting the attention from the dissatisfaction with inequality and giving people something else to be distracted by.
Good. Any other question before?
Yeah, I can take a few.
Yeah, fair. All right. Two more, and then you answer them.
Well, first, it was a very enlightening conversation we had. You pointed out, you give us a historical view of China, very interesting for us to
Tell him
China
who you
right
are.
now.
Roberto, tell him who you are. Introduce yourself.
Teixeira da Costa. I'm one of the founders of Business Council for Latin America and the Brazilian Center for International Relations. I'm an economist by formation, but not an economist by profession. Okay. Let's go back to the international relations of China. If I talk to my Chinese experts, they all mention that Brazil up to now doesn't know how to deal with China. They think that we didn't realize yet the best way for Brazil to have a relationship with China. And you mentioned that, for your point of view, the relationship of China and Brazil is very good. I cannot plot that very well. The Brazilians think that we don't perceive how the China relationship with Brazil right now is only a trading association, investment association. Don't forget that, like it or not, we are America. We are part of America. And our relationship with the United States is historical. We speak English, and we visit the United States. The Brazilians go to the United States as they go to Bahia, and the relationship is much more close. We are America. And dealing with the United States, we may not like, but you know how they react. And I think right now we don't know yet how to deal with China. That's it. I'm not an expert on China. I try to learn, because that's what my Brazilian diplomats and experts of China tells me. I don't know if you agree with that or not. And the second point, which for me was a quite surprise, because I won one of the skeptics about these BRICS. But you pointed out that perhaps BRICS much more than I personally was realizing, because as you mentioned, it's so different, the nature of the countries, Brazil, China, India, and Russia, and what they can have in common. Not to like the United States, I don't think that's enough, okay? Those are the two questions.
Right. Just one more, and then the second one.
My name is Eloisa de Cunto. I'm a lawyer. I used to live in China. It's a beautiful place, a beautiful country. Beijing is my city. My question is in a way related to her question, Elia. And because you said something really beautiful for me, I never thought about the Confucianism as a way of getting back to the culture. And my question is always, which culture? China has at least 33 different minorities going on, and which the Han minority is the culture that we are trying to get back, and because some issues and riots internally in China in relation to the other minorities, and they have to obey the central government. So how can you put this together with this mixture of different cultures inside China? Each one, for me, the one that shocked me more was the problems with the Yurgis near the Kazakhstan and so I don't think it's only China needs to think about the neighbors, but also the inside different neighbors we have inside China. This is what I want you to tell me your idea.
Sorry. Yes, I think the first two questions about income distribution, I totally agree, as I said, but growth, exactly this is why the government, the new leadership, officially dropped GDP growth as the measure for a local government performance, because last 30 years, this is really the hard data for a local official to be promoted, saying, in the city, how much GDP growth is there? They drop it now. The issue of environment, for example, the issue, as you mentioned, even more importantly, distribution, that is inequality. Now here, I totally agree. The Chinese leadership, however, they are not doing, that's your second question, not doing anti-corruption campaign to divert the question of inequality, that what they're really trying to do is to pointing directly at the issue where the inequality come from. The inequality in China the last 30 years primarily caused by illegal means of power play of transfer the national wealth. This is the largest scale transfer of national wealth into private pockets by people who are having power. It's not because a few entrepreneurs or Jack Ma, Alibaba. Even Jack Ma has a lot of connections with policy elite, but that's another issue. But it's not because private enterprises, they are grow so fast, they deserve it, but it's because a large chunk of the money went illegally into officials' pockets. So this is one way of addressing, and they are courageous in that sense. They're actually pointing out this is the problem. But after they confiscate, here is another side of the story. As I said, you have a small, low-level official holding 200 million cash at home, which was discovered. It's a very low-level official. Why? Because he's the guy he's decided of supplies running water to the surrounding region. He can cut off making threat to anybody, saying, don't pay up, I want to cut off the water supply. And that guy got 200 million cash in his cellar, which is shocking. It's shocking. So the confiscated money also become part of the public, distribution process. So in that question, I think, yeah, go ahead, yeah. Yes. Almost on daily basis, yes. No, but that's what I calculated, at least, yeah. It's a huge, yeah, I mean, I'm talking about reasonably high level. I haven't counted the low level. I'm talking about Yeah, deputy governor, deputy mayor, that kind of level. Yes, so it's a serious campaign in my view. Not only restore parties' prestige, if successful, I don't know yet, but also restore this image of, how to solve this income distribution issue.
Is it
Now,
widely,
yeah.
sorry, so is it widely, the campaign against corruption is widely publicized?
Yes,
by
yes.
the authorities?
It's surprisingly transparent, yes. Surprisingly, I'm not saying every case. The case on the Politburo member, for example, cannot be as transparent. So far they have 1, 2, 3 Politburo. I mean, in China, there are only 25 members in Politburo. We're talking about top guys. You got 3, so it's not something, probably more coming.
10%.
Yeah, I mean, even though they just retired, that's the previous Politburo. I mean, not the new leadership. But I'm sure it's big deal. It's never happened before. So this is a serious campaign, and it seemed to be working so far. Now, the question you ask how we don't understand each other, I must push that question back to my Brazilian colleagues here as well. My understanding is there is not a serious China Studies Center even in Brazil or University of São Paulo. It's shocking. In the United States system, every little college has a China or Asian program, and the Chinese language learning now, today, in the whole world, reaching 200 million, all over Europe, United States. No, I'm just saying there is a cultural kind of interaction issue where the Brazilian education system does not seem to be working very hard in that direction. Now, on China's side, I would say probably Chinese, like my generation, grew up knowing more about Brazil than Brazilians know about China. We have George Amado. Amado's translated his work. We grew up reading, of course, not today's Brazil, we know, but we love Amado. But that's the only thing we translate, by the way. So, but how much the Brazilians, growing up reading, serious kind of Chinese writing literature? I don't know. I'm just saying the learning language and the culture, it's a fundamental. And the Portuguese language is catching up in China, surprisingly. For one reason is that Macau, as you know, we created in Macau, it's called the Russopho, the alliances, what do you call the Portuguese speaking, what's called?
Community
okay, yes. And that has 16 member states, which is headquartered in Macau. And the Chinese want to, or they try to, use that mechanism. It's not yet, happening yet, but more with Portugal, with African countries, but also including Brazil. Brazil is one of the members, to build up this kind of cultural link, exchange programs, and so on and so forth. Yeah. Yes. Well, Confucian Center is,
You're more than that.
yes,
Many
Confucian Institute is set by Chinese government. That's fine. I mean, we have 150 now all over the world. That's a Chinese government project. We try to promote. What I'm saying is the country like Brazil itself, how much you are doing. This is one thing I really think it's not sufficient. Mexico has better. They have done better job. Even Argentina, my knowledge, have done better job in understanding China. So the cultural understanding is not quite there. So this is, I think, it's something I agree with you. I mean, the Brazilians probably are not sure how to deal with China. But now the minority issues, I put this way. When I say cultural restoration, I of course referring to the mainstream, the Han Chinese. Now, minority problem is a problem. I have no doubt about it. But I would say, no matter how in the West the minority problem look very big, Tibetans, mainly Tibetans and the Uyghurs, the Islam, the Turks. If you add them, statistically add them together, we have altogether 56 minorities in China, 55. And they put all together, it's about 5 point some percentage of the population. Now, it is a problem. It has caused a lot of problems. It is difficult to deal with. The Chinese tried many methods. Chinese government made a lot of mistakes in the past, and they tried to appease minority as well. As you know, it's not always easy when you have a separatist movement for any country. Think about the Basques in Spain. Think about Northern Ireland. You know, the history, even democracies, it's not so easy to deal with. A kind of minority who actually had a separatist tendency. Now, the rest of the minorities in China are not separatist, so you do not hear much a problem. The problem is Tibetans and the Muslims. But even that, I think it's the. I really don't think the minority issue itself have a major impact on what the Chinese process of cultural restoration itself, because simply by numbers they are not there. Okay, it is a separate issue, I would argue. Okay, no matter how morally you can argue, it's a different issue. It must be dealt with successfully, but it does not have a significant influence on what we are doing today, which is a restoring Confucian value system. Okay, which they are not part of the Confucian value system. So this is the point I'm making. Yeah, yeah. That's the Uyghurs. That's the okay. Yeah. Well, yes. Radicalized, you mean? But don't. I agree with that, but don't forget American war on terror has done a lot to the entire Muslim world as well. It's not a independent, isolated phenomenon. Think about Indonesia. The largest Muslim country is not in Middle East, it's Indonesia. Indonesian Muslims historically are the most modest, the moderate, Muslim. They're never really radical. Yet after the 9/11, after war on terror, especially George President Bush's language, crusade, things like that against. Even Indonesians got radicalized. They have a Bali bombing and several other things. So it's not an isolated phenomenon. Even in China, there are a number of Muslim communities also influenced very much by that as well. So I wouldn't, but again, I'm still prefer to separate the radicalism, Muslim radicalism, and the terrorism. That's not always mean. Yeah, terrorism is another thing. There are a group of people who are really terrorists. You cannot deny. Yes. All right.
Good.
Okay. Yes.
Wait. First here, and then the three of.
老师晚上好.
Ah,
Good evening. I'm Colonel Mauricio from Brazilian Army. I've just finished a course at National Defense University, Beijing.
Wow.
Okay, and of course I have to pull the issue to defense area.
Okay, sure.
In my paper at the finish of the course, one of the conclusions I made is that the main terrain for concern on defense in China right now, it would be on perception. Why would be this? Because of the paradigm of the airplane flight. Something like you said, if you're flying, especially in economic class, in an airplane, just beside a very overweight man, he might not want to bother you, but he will definitely bother you. So the point is, when you look at China defense, it's the second budget in the world, kind of 2 million man armed forces, the PLA as a whole.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, if you look at Chinese Navy, it's quite small for its shore.
Right.
And when China tried to launch a carrier, an airplane carrier, there was many reactions around the world.
Right.
By the way, the carrier is not fully operational up to now, as I know.
Right.
And Brazil has 2 and nobody butters. So this is just a small example. We can go on and on this.
Sure.
But I think the point for China, in not only in economics and cultural,
Right.
but it would be in perception. Because sometimes, just because being big, when China does something, whatever,
Sure.
it's always perceived as a threat.
Right.
So besides the need that you stressed, sir, that Brazil and other countries need to study to learn about China,
Right.
I would ask you again, wouldn't it be also a concern for China to live better, to make itself known in all areas, mainly on defense?
Right. Right.
谢谢.
Right. Thank you.
Is there any other question on related to defense? No. So I would suggest you answer him.
Okay.
And then we go on to the other
yes.
questions.
No, this is a very good question. Basically, I think what you refer to is that transparency issue, which is not, it's not a new question. And yes, I totally agree. There is always a problem from outside, which they don't understand the Chinese national security policy. They don't understand how the policy is made. They don't understand the purpose of the policy, and because our system is very closed. Now, here I think I want to emphasize the main problem is United States from a Chinese point of view. Now, you mentioned Chinese military budget is number 2, but remember the whole world, 12 top nations add together, it's a US budget. So it's proportionally still very small, you know. And you say the Chinese Navy is small. Yeah, it is small. It's way too small for its future, you know, national coast, even for coastal defense, not to mention Blue Navy. And the carrier we actually got from Ukraine, it's an empty shell. We refit it. And so far, it's not working very well, as you know. It's a training vehicle, basically. Certainly not for fighting. And but they try, probably build a couple of, you know, in the future. But that totally, I don't think it's not against the overall the Chinese capacity of you know economy in the future. But I totally agree with you. So far they have failed to explain themselves clearly, because they're always afraid of making their intention clear to the United States. This is what I got. You studied National Defense University. I happen to know a few generals. We work together occasionally. That's the key issue here. We are way too weak vis-a-vis the United States. So if we make our intention clearly, for example, nuclear weapon. United States, 2,000 warheads. We have maybe 100 or something. Now, how do you make your intention clear with that kind of symmetry? You cannot, really. Okay? The only case we actually tried, one of the generals in your university, General Zhu, actually made a mistake announcing our nuclear strategies Los Angeles, Los Angeles, and Los Angeles, which is upsetting Americans. Basically saying our nuclear weapons only focusing on one city, which is Los Angeles. So, you know, when you make that clear, which Americans are totally upset, saying we're going to massacre 30 million people, which is surrounding, you know, Los Angeles area. It's difficult, I think. But the problem is the United States. How we deal with it, I don't know. I don't know. Yes.
Thank you. Then,
Yes.
well, Silvio, and then the lady. And then
My name is Osmar Shofi. I am a former Brazilian diplomat, and my question relates to events in Hong Kong. How does that impact in China?
Right.
So the other question. The lady first, and then okay. Oh, never mind.
Doesn't matter. Yes.
Hi, thank you. My name is Larissa. I lived in Beijing for 5 years. I was
So say
student and
something in Chinese.
你好，晚上好。
You're doing what in Beijing?
在人民大学做我的研究生。
Okay.
I did my master's in Renmin University. You asked me to do that. Anyway, so I'm sorry to go back to the issue on corruption, but
Sure.
I'm very curious about how positive you seem to be regarding this issue, and some comments about it. Last year, well, everything is about what people say. We can't really prove because people were silenced after that. But at the end of last year, there was a lot of talk among foreign journalists about how their activity in China is being more difficult than it was before. There were problems with visas being refused from journalists from Bloomberg, New York Times, you know, many of them. And in specific cases, there were cases of journalists going after corruption cases that could link the family of Xi Jinping on very serious accusations. So it's hard to think that the family of Xi Jinping has nothing to do with any corruption case in the past. So my question is, wouldn't he be just trying to centralize power to a level in which he could be maybe as powerful as Mao Zedong was at a time? Is he trying to do anything similar to that by focusing on fighting against other princelings and other people of power that are not on his line of work, for example, Bo Xilai, etc. So this is the first point. And also about the transparency and the corruption cases, I agree with you that the numbers are really surprising, but maybe with the legal reform that you mentioned, that's going to change. But currently, the processes don't seem to be so transparent. Like, they do accuse people of being corrupt, but you never know what are they actually being accused for. Like, how, except for some cases when you actually know the value, but how much did they steal, and who gave them that money, and for what purpose, and who are not only the people that took the money, but who gave them the money, and for what? So I don't think the processes are actually so transparent.
My name is Roberto Paranhos do Rio Branco. I've been also with Roberto, a colleague in some company like that we invested in China, for instance, Embraco, but we were heavily in home appliances, myself also in agribusiness and some other activities. Today I'm president of a chamber of commerce. I also have some joint venture with an American friend that we buy some products from China in personal care, so many hats. But my first question also is very short regarding what you just said. If those 15 guys that you say, at high level, are arrested every day, if just being a kind of dictatorship China is mainly for having people at the prison that are mainly in a menace for power, you know, just getting not, perhaps if the transparency is really good, that these people are arrested because they can be in the future a competitor or even trying to take the power from who has the power today. But my main question is, first, China has always, even our friend Osiris Silva, that has been the founder of Embraer here in Brazil, was among the brains that were in China in a group helping to make a plan years ago. And so China has plans. Second, if in those plans, when China intend to be #1 in the world in economy, since they are investing all over the world, here, not only here in South America, Latin America, and Africa, but also, so my question is, since I also am the president of a chamber of commerce, if BRICS can help, you spoke about Russia, can help this be a closer and better relation, not only in Russia, but mainly also with India, since they also are very close, and I've been attending all these BRICS meetings. So these are my questions. Thank you.
Okay. Yes, yes, the first is Hong Kong. Now, Hong Kong issue has been widely misunderstood in the West, first of all. It's always assumption by the Western press that Hong Kong, before transfer to China, seemed to be a better place, and then the Chinese seem to be ruining it. I'm saying there is a kind of popular perception outside, and also the idea of the students asking for democratic, procedure, supposedly is the demand that the Chinese not violating the original deal between China and Britain. That's also a mistaken view. Now, the point is that what is Hong Kong, how Hong Kong had been run by the British. Well, first of all, the British run for over 150 years. The British never want to put the democracy, a democratic system in Hong Kong. It is Hong Kong people in the 50s, 60s, several times they actually on the streets protesting against colonial system. It is a colonial governor who's directly appointed by London. So there is no procedure of democracy, but Hong Kong was run in the very innovative way because the political cliche in Hong Kong is run by jockey club, Hong Kong Shanghai Bank, SHBC, Jiating Medicine, you see, Jiating Medicine, which is British Taipan, and then colonial governor. In that order. That's the old cliche. What does it mean? It really says Hong Kong politics under British rule is a tycoon politics. It's a business tycoon who coordinate among themselves with colonial governor. It's a happy go-between. You know, colonial governor is a deal maker. He's not the most important one, but jockey club is more important. You know, the horse racing. That's the cliche. Now, when the deal was made between Margaret Thatcher and Deng Xiaoping over Hong Kong transfer to one country, two system, basically based on that model, says we simply want that tycoon politics continue. British have no objection, right? Except the colonial governors appointed by Beijing. Okay, so that's how Beijing promised. But gradually, there is a democratic procedure was gradually put in. Actually, there starts election now. Okay, the Beijing says the election should go slow. We are now to 2017. We allow election for a long list, but the list we have to screen. Maybe after, you know, next stage, we don't even screen the list anymore. Now, it is quite a progress, in my view, considering the original deal. Somehow was twisted into a kind of anti-democratic steps by Beijing or conspiracy in Beijing, which I don't think is fair. By the way, Hong Kong tycoon politics is alive and well, unless you destroy that power base. Okay, you have to deal with the tycoons first. If you don't destroy that power base, forget about this immediate transition into democratic system. They would be the one benefit most from this slower transition process. So, because Hong Kong is non-democracy, but always have a good rule of law. That's perfect. It's very much like a Singapore, as you know. Singapore is run by one family, yet they have a very good rule of law, right? Democracy, the hell with democracy. It doesn't matter, right? So, this is exactly what tycoons wanted. So I would not be too enthusiastic about this umbrella movement as if it's going to lead to some fundamental, it's not going to happen. Now, the question about the corruption, transparency, and so on, yes, what I'm trying to say is it's relatively transparent compared with what they did before. Before they arrest people, they didn't even have a decent trial. Today, every person who was arrested, which is announced in the newspaper, okay, who will have a trial process. When you say what they are charged, during that trial process, everything will be leveled there, and the evidence will be shown. Now, is that perfect? No, it's not. Because, as I said, our legal system is still very much, since 1949, very much influenced by government administrative power and by party power. This is why the actual trial process itself could run into some problems if you don't have a serious legal reform. This is precisely what the party tried to do last month, to install some kind of semi-independent system to allow them to do this due process. I'm sure it's not going to be perfect. It takes much longer time to do that. But the very fact that they tried this, in my view, is something quite, it's a groundbreaking for me. I haven't seen that, So in that sense, I will say yes, transparency. Now, the last point about the BRICS. Can the BRICS help China, and China want to be, has a plan to be #1 economy? I always suspicious about this idea, China being #1. Has my writings in Chinese press, which I write in column in China regularly, a leading paper, I always question that kind of language. What does it mean? 2 years ago, somebody says Chinese is now #2 economy in the surpassed Japan. Okay, make you feel good. So what? I mean, what do you mean being #1, #2? GDP, per capita GDP, where is the per capita GDP? China is probably what, a few years ago, it's at the same level as Iraq. Probably now it's much better, but still 1.3 billion people. I mean, the overall GDP does not say much here. Secondly, all the other conditions are not up to it. We say that we surpassed Japan, for example. Makes no sense. Were Japanese so successful in dealing with their environmental problems, for example? Japanese in the 60s had one of the terrible environmental records, but they are so successful. Japan today is a clean, we are sending all those smogs across the ocean to Tokyo. And they, so all these other, conditions are not there to make it look like #1 or #2. So the concept itself really means very little, in my view. I avoid using this kind of language to begin with. Then the BRICS, can BRICS help? Yes, of course. Now, I'm just to return to the earlier question about BRICS, what's in common? What is only anti-American? The ambassador who says, no, it's not. The rules of the game of global governance, the BRICS can work together. I'm talking about the international monetary system. Why US dollar is supposed to be the one who continue to dominate the entire system, where the Federal Reserve can continue print money to do almost anything they want to do. Now, the BRICS Bank is going to be, which is going to be in Shanghai, my understanding. The BRICS Bank is supposed to be bigger than the World Bank. That's what I try to remember exact figures, the capital endowment. And now, is that bank is going to challenge the American leading position? I'm sure in the long run it will. Okay, EU, Euro, we used to depend on Euro. We hope Euro, you see Chinese far more interest in supporting Euro than some European EU members, Eastern Europeans, for example, or Greece. But we support the Euro. We hope Euro rise to the challenge, but it didn't happen. So that's why BRICS countries are working very close together. We had a major swap deal with the Russians. As you can see, the huge gas deal with Russians, it's not just the supply of gas. We're actually using our own currency making the deal. That itself is a huge change as well. So there are a lot of things, I think, the BRICS countries can help each other. What? With India, Ruby, it's so far I think it's not going to happen. But India is also part of the BRICS, institution. India also have difficulty of accepting US dollar predominance. The Indian government has mentioned that. So the monetary system, trading system, and if you want to talk about, the trading system, WTO, Indian having even more problems with the West than China has. Okay, then the TPP question, and so on and so forth. So yes, BRICS has a great future, in my view. Yes, I think that's.
All right.
Do we have?
Just very briefly, because we are running out of time.
Okay.
To say to him that in these years, 15 years dealing with China,
Yes.
with law,
Yes.
the transparency increased very much, and the due process of law was established
Right.
in China.
Right.
You need to ask, you have answers, not completely, not full answers, but what you said is getting much better this 15 years.
Right.
Would you like to comment on that? Or can I?
No, that's a comment.
So
Yeah.
I'm afraid I have to close the conversation now, and thank you so much. I think it was a fascinating conversation
happy.
with
No,
you.
good-
I
very
hope
good
to
question.
see you again here in the near future.
Wow.